We're live. Welcome to Book Bites with Maggie. My name is Maggie. I am the Youth Services Assistant here at Napanee Public Library. Joining me today is Michaela. She does all of our wonderful PR and is usually behind the screen, but we pulled her out today. She's going to be sharing some of her favorite poetry books for our theme today. Okay, so to get us kicking off, we have lots of poetry books, but I wanted to explain a little bit more about the different types of poetry that we have. So a traditional poetry book is going to have, your block text and maybe like different topics as it goes through a book. If some of the books that we talk about are not just a collection of poetry, but they're novels in verse, which means like each poem, each page leads through a story. So it's poetry written in like a chronological order so that when you read it, it would be a novel in verse, would be something that several of mine are in my stack. Are yours too?
I have a few, yeah.
Okay, and then we also have books that are written in prose, which would be like spoken word. So they're written not like the way that we're taught in school to write to make sure you have all the different parts of speech in a sentence, but rather they're written almost like we speak. Is that a good way of thinking about it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got different types. So it's not just poetry, collections of poetry. We've got a little bit of different types of poetry in our sets. This is going to be a great topic for those of you who are doing our Expand Your Horizons challenge. If you need a different type of genre than what you traditionally read, we might have some great titles for you today. The formats that we have, we'll try to leave a message in the comments after we are done being live here, and we'll tell you what formats they come in. We'll try to mention them too as we're going along, but by all means, if you have additional stories or books that you feel like fit this theme, leave messages in the comments, interact with us, because other viewers might get lists of books from you guys, so that's super helpful. I did mention Expand Your Horizons. It's going on right now. You can pick up your digital list in the Beanstack app, or we have paper copies. We also just this year are doing our first Expand Your Horizons Junior Task List, and this is going to have lots of great fun for our elementary age kids. And our digital collections are also growing. So Livy by Overdrive, we've joined a massive consortium. I think the last time we checked, there's like almost 200,000 titles in this. So some of the poetry books are honestly going to be better as an audiobook, especially if you can have the pacing and the verbiage and like the rhythm and all that stuff that goes along with these types of books. Audiobooks are a great way to do that. Libby by Overdrive is going to have audiobooks as well as other formats. Hoopla is another great option for you with your library card. You have access to those as well, and you can use the app for those. Okay, ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like my stack is a lot bigger, but several of yours were checked out, which means you've got really good titles. I have one here that I read a couple of years ago. This was Muted. This is by Tammy Charles. We only have this as available as an e-audiobook, and that's how I was able to read this book. When I was looking for a story that would take me to a different place after I had read some really heavy titles, this did not do that because this was a heavy book itself, and I was not expecting that. This is going to be a story that is written, it's like a novel in verse, and it, how do I explain it? Is CSI still on? Not CSI.
NCIS.
No, what's the other one?
Criminal Minds.
No. Law and Order. Law and Order.
Oh,
Okay, so this is like Law and Order, ripped from the headlines. So like you have, it's supposed to be fictional, but it's too believable. So it takes the stories that you're hearing in the news and it makes them into a book. It's the story that needs to be heard. So in this book, it's going to take our protagonist, and she is bound and determined she is going to join the music industry. But then you have to come into the storyline of at what cost. Does she sell too much of herself and get herself into a bad situation? Yes, she does. So that's where you get into it's not an easy read. It did really remind me of Law and Order, and it's a single book, so not part of a series, anything like that. This one, again, is Tammy Charles' book, Muted, and her double eye color plays a big part in this story. So if you can see that on the cover, she has one brown eye, heterochromia.
Heterochromia?
Something like that. It plays a part into the story. So I don't know if you can really see that, but she has one blue eye, one brown eye, and you want to root for her, but also just smack her across the face because you're making really bad choices as a protagonist. Okay, did you read any that like really were different than what you picked up intentionally to read?
Kinda.
Kinda? Okay,
So-
go ahead. Show one, even if it's not what you were thinking.
Okay, so the first book I ever read like this, we'll start with that one. I probably read like 10 years ago. So when I was a kid, a teen. So I hated it, to be honest.
You hated poetry?
I hated Crank by
Okay.
Ellen Hopkins. Only because I don't like reading prose when I was younger. So if you look, like, it looks like a poem. But you read it like a book. Like,
So one leads to the next, leads to the next.
but the story of Crank it's really powerful. It's about like a teen who struggles with, I mean, everything you could think of, honestly. But Crank is like a word for drugs. So that's kind of the main part of it. Addiction is a big thing, but like you said, it reads like a poem, it reads like a song, but it also reads like a novel, which was really weird for me as a kid. But the story behind it is really good. So
I think
it's
they're
kind of
often
a weird
intimidating
one.
when they look like that
Yeah,
size.
and it looks huge, and there's a series of like, I don't even know, 5 maybe in the series, and she wrote other ones, but they're all written like this.
So lots of white space.
So
I liked Identical of hers.
Is that part of the
Is
same
that-
series?
is that one
It's
of the
not a
new
part-
ones?
It's not a part of the series. It probably came out like 10 years ago.
So this is her first one she ever wrote, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Crank was the first, and then I think there's 4
Impulse, I think.
that goes with this one.
Glass. I don't remember what the other one
I don't
was.
remember.
Do they all go together? They have different topics.
I read the first and the second, but I hated the writing so much, just the way it was laid out, that I couldn't keep reading it. But having read it so long ago, it still left an impact on me where where I remember what this book was about. I remember the characters. I
But it
remember
pushed
what
you
she
outside of your
struggled with.
comfort zone to read something
Yeah.
new.
Yeah, I would say so. But
Now look at your stack. You've got lots of other poetry books. So
now I'm obsessed with poetry, so maybe I'll read Crank again and give it another
shot.
try.
Yeah.
So, but it was really good.
like it.
I liked it.
Jason Reynolds is the author of our next book. He is the first time, second year in a row. What is his title now? He's the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. I'm looking at you, Martha, like you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about,
It's
but I can't
yeah,
remember.
he just won the second year of being an ambassador of something with literature, which makes us all really excited because his books are all great. but Jason Reynolds, he writes books that have to be told, and oftentimes you can come across the storyline that spans decades. This is the exact opposite. This entire story takes place in 5 minutes. Honestly, probably less. It takes place over the course of an elevator ride from the top floor to the bottom floor. Something has provoked our protagonist. He is out to get revenge. He's got a gun in the side of his pants, and he is going to avenge his brother. And it kind of reads like A Christmas Carol. Okay, no, follow me here. Okay, so each time he gets to a new floor, the doors open, somebody enters his world. And they are going to give more and more and more of the story. You're going to find out why his brother was in the place that he was. You're going to find out what happened to his brother. You're going to get all the backstory. And each person that comes into this elevator and shares just a few moments with our elevator ride going down and down and down are going to play an impact into the story, so that when he gets to the bottom level and he's ready to go out in the world with his gun in his belt, is he going to leave the elevator at all, or is he going to leave the elevator with a different intention than when he got in? Can you imagine? So this story is like, it's almost 300 pages, okay, written in lots and lots of short little poems.
I think I read
but
that
such
in
a
an hour.
massive impact. It's an hour if you listen to it.
I think I read it in an hour.
Read it in an hour. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
believe it.
And
So
because it's so intense.
is so intense. This is like edge of your seat. What's going to happen? Who's going to impact the storyline next? Fantastic, fantastic book. So it says on the back here, a cannon, a strap, a piece, a biscuit, a burner, a heater, a chopper, a gat, a hammer, a tool for rule. Or you can call it a gun. So think about all those different ways that you can describe something, and that's exactly what poetry can do to you. It really builds the world up. Fast read. Also, so it's going to be young adult. It's a book. We have it as a book on CD, ebook, and e-audio. So I think all of the ways that you could listen to this book or read it are going to be impactful to you. If poetry is not something that you are comfortable reading and getting the pacing down, because the pacing and the way that you read poetry can be just as important as the words themselves. Reading through it real fast, you might not absorb as much of it. Having somebody read it to you could be a totally different way to experience this book. So this is Long Way Down. It has won lots of awards. I feel like the last time I've seen like the jacket, it's got at least 3 or 4 different, what do you say, seals?
Seals, and it
Like
was
seals on-
shortlisted for the
National Book Award.
the National Book Award
Yeah.
before it was even released.
Yeah, so like our copy here, we got it in the library collection long before it started getting all these awards. But if you were to buy it today, you would have lots and lots of badges on it. Fantastic book. I hope that you would get a chance to read it. Okay, what else you got?
So I also have one by Jason Reynolds. I was lucky enough to be the first person to check out this book when the library got it.
Oh, don't gloat at all.
Because I had it on hold. But we don't have it in the collection right now. It's checked out. But Jason Reynolds teamed up with Jason Griffin, who is like a nationally renowned artist, and wrote Ain't Burned All the Bright. I don't even have a lot of words for this book, just because it's something that I've never read before, something like this. So I read it in like 30 minutes. I think I was on my lunch break. As soon as I finished it, I wanted to read it again. I wanted to look at it again, because not only is it poetry, it's like 3 giant poems that are put together to make like one book. But the whole thing is covered in this amazing artwork by Jason Griffin, which just helps the story kind of do what it needs to do. So you see things, you read things, and it's
Add that to my list.
it's about like 2020, everything that everyone went through with the pandemic. Also, it's mainly about racism in America and the Black Lives Matter movement. But just the way it's written, the way the artwork is, it really it makes you kind of emotional to even read about it, and then like you just want to read it again because it's just that good.
Do you remember what section that one was in?
This is YA. It's
Okay.
young adult. I think it's just young adult fiction. So it's just in the young adult teen collection. But it is on the new shelf because, like I said, we just got it. It
Right.
just came out in March, I think. So, yeah. Ain't Burned All the Bright. Another one by Jason Reynolds.
So the books that we have today, if we have the physical copy or if it's just currently checked out, we can put you on hold for items. So leave comments, let us know. We'd be happy to set them aside for you. You can pick them up at your convenience here at the library. Lisa Phipps, this is not a brand new book to Book Bites. We've talked about this one before. Lisa Phipps is a librarian and she's also a Hoosier. So she's been in some of our other book lists. Starfish is a debut novel. It's not from this year, so you can't use it for a 2020 debut author. But this one was a debut novel in verse from 2021. I think I read it early because I got it as an ARC. I think it was published in 2021, but it is going to be in our kids section. This is going to be kind of a coming of age and coming of like growing into yourself story. So she is fat shamed. Ellie is the main character in this book, and she is fat shamed to the point that she she's just tired of living and she's exhausted, and she's not just fat shamed by the kids in her school, but also some family members. And it's a very hard story to read, but it also makes you want to whoop and holler when she kind of overcomes these obstacles and she takes up the space that she deserves to have in the world. So this is poetry. It's written, so it's going to tell you the story. It's a novel in verse and a fast read. It has won several awards since it came out, but Starfish by Lisa Phipps is one you don't want to miss. It is going to be middle grade, and we have the physical book in our collection, and I haven't checked, but it might be on Hoopla too, so we might have that in additional formats as well. Okay, what else do you have?
Okay, so I'm gonna save the best for last, but one that I just listened to this week, which I read like 3 poetry books this week, but one that I just listened to is by my favorite Instagram poet, who is Morgan Harper Nichols. If you follow her on Instagram, she's also an artist, but she's a poet, and some of her poetry was put together in a book. I listened to the audiobook, which was really good, but the book itself is probably like 10 times better because she puts all of her own artwork in it. But this is All Along You Were Blooming. So her poetry style is more like, you know, overcoming, sharing your joy, like working through the hardships. So it's very uplifting. But All Along You Were Blooming kind of goes through the story of like, yeah, people go through the hard stuff, but like all along you're getting through it. You're growing, you're becoming more beautiful, getting more, you know, planted in the earth, and basically all along you were going through this, you were blooming. So it's a really great collection. It is just straight up poetry. It's just a collection of poems.
Do we have that one in our
So,
digital collection? You said you listened to it.
I think we have it only on Hoopla.
Okay.
Yeah, it's showing up only in Hoopla.
But it is pretty new, so maybe we'll get it for the collection or something. But it is in Hoopla, and I listened to the audiobook, and it's really good. But then I went to my Amazon cart and put the book in my cart because I like the artwork. So either way is fine, though, I think.
It's good.
Yeah.
Joy McCullough wrote this next book, We Are the Ashes, We Are the Fire. It really reminded me a lot of this duology, Speak and Shout. I don't know if you guys have read these ones. This one really reminded me of these. That's how you say that. So this is going to be a split timeline. It's a modern day story that's social media influenced, and it is about a family who is advocating for their daughter, their sister, who was raped at a frat party in college. They go to court. The rapist is found guilty, and everybody is joyously celebrating in those early chapters in the scene building, and then all of a sudden the judge decides that he needs no jail time. And so you go from this emotional high, and you are so deep into the story early on in the pages that you just feel so defeated when that sentence comes down that you are immediately into the shoes of our main character. So it's these two sisters. One is she's just ready to check out. She's spent, she's exhausted after all the court stuff. The other sister feels like she's really let down the presence that she's been on social media advocating for her sister through this whole thing. In the story, so you have like this sense of revenge, kind of like you get for Long Way Down, the Jason Reynolds book that we had talked about. But in this one, it's different because the time slip narrative of it. In it, you also have in France, I can't even think what the country is now. So like our time slip is like 15th century France, and in there is a woman warrior who is out to just absolutely kill all men. She hates men for her own story. And so you have this back and forth of like right now, modern story and all the social media that goes into it, balanced so well with the story from 500 years ago. I've never read anything like that where it's such a displacement, but the feminism in it just has you advocating for both of our main characters, even though one is long since dead. The heroism inside of that story is just wonderful. So she has this inner dialogue with this person that she's reading. So our story has a story within it, and the way that it is told through prose, you get each oh, there's a post-it in this one.
Oh, that one looks like a novel, though. I don't know.
It's kind of like, but it's both.
Oh, I see.
So like, okay, so actually that's a good way to show it. So you have the poetry, but then when she is reading the story back in history, so I wonder what you would call this. It's kind of hybrid. Can you have hybrid poetry?
Why not?
Sure.
Why not?
Yeah. It's worth it. Read read this book. So as you're reading about the 500-year-old story, it's written in here. Oh, there's illustrations too. I forgot about these. And then the poems are intermixed with it. Fantastic book. It's not an easy read though. It's going to leave you like angsty. There's trigger warnings for rape culture through the centuries because boys will be boys and it's never the man's fault and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you're going to get angsty when you read this one. But Joy McCullough has written books for all ages. This one is specifically teen. We are the ashes, we are the fire. It's a crime unpunished, but a story reclaimed. Since we mentioned this one with these ones, Speak and Shout are both books by Lori Halse Anderson. Let's see. Speak was actually turned into a movie a couple of years ago. It has Kirsten Dunst in it. Is that right? That's not right.
Kristen Stewart.
Huh? Kristen Stewart. Wrong one. Okay, so, and she's like young. So, I mean, I think the movie is really, really old. But this is a call to action because with the whole Me Too movement that is still actually very, very relevant, this is a story of how little rape culture has changed in 20 years. So it's going to be a follow-up to Speak, because you go from speaking to shouting when things are not changing as fast as we would like. I would definitely recommend reading them in tandem. So read Speak and then read Shout, and just be ready to answer that call to action. Okay, give us another one.
Okay, so in the vein of feminism and women empowerment, I just read this book yesterday. So I thought I would bring it. This is my own copy, but we do have the ebook. We have the e-audiobook, whether that's on Indiana Digital Library or Hoopla. But The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace is the second book in her collection for these. The first one I think is called The Princess Saves Herself.
Yeah.
She did write the Glass Slippers
Slipper.
one, but
Mhm.
this is a separate collection from that. But there's not much I can say about this book that wouldn't give it away, but on the first page or so, there is a page just for trigger warnings.
Wow.
And the trigger warnings include, the whole page, it says this book contains sensitive material relating to child abuse, intimate partner abuse, sexual assault, eating disorders, trauma, death, murder, violence, fire, menstruation, transphobia, and more. Remember to practice self-care before, during, and after reading.
Oh my gosh, every book needs to have a trigger warning page. That's amazing.
All of her books have trigger warning pages. Like,
Really?
And let me tell you, I read this and I was like, okay. But it touches on every single thing and more in this list.
It's like this big.
I mean, it really goes for it though. Like, parts of me when I was reading this was uncomfortable because it was like so deep. It was so dark. It was like dark and twisty at its finest. But I think that's what's important about poetry, especially poetry that focuses on feminism. It gets dark and twisty. I mean, that's the world that we live in. So it makes sense that, you know, this is how I feel, because that's how we feel all the time as women in today's society. So it really touches on everything. It was really good when I read it. There was parts that I wanted to like underline and pages.
You can do that. You could do that. in
Yeah,
your own
this
copy.
is my own copy, so I can do that. It's stamped with my name on it, so this is mine. But I wanted to like fold the pages in and go back and read it. Like I wanted to apply it. I was taking pictures of certain pages, like, and then finally I was like, I just have to read it because I need to know like what else is in here. So The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace. Pretty good.
Good. That's how I kind of felt about this one. Jacqueline Woodson is an author who I'll read anything that she writes. She's written everything from like children's chapter books to poetry. She's written historical books. She's written memoirs. Writing in verse and freestyle is very unique, I feel like, to her. I mean, there's a couple here that have been like that. But when I'm reading her books, I can hear her voice. And part of that is because I do follow her on social media. I hear her speaking quite often. And so like when I'm reading the books, I can hear her. And actually just 2 years ago, I listened to her read one of her books on social media, and it was something that popped up in my time hop just this week where I was listening to her read a book, Brown Girl Dreaming, which I don't have in my stack here, but a book that has impacted me, and hearing her read something that I had already previously read and gave it a whole new life. And authors, they can do that with poetry. This one here though, this is going to be an adult book. This is going to be a displaced story. So you're going to have two protagonists. One is a 16-year-old girl who's almost doing like her debut into society, but then you also have the story following her mother, who was also supposed to be debuting into society 16 years earlier, and then she ends up pregnant. And so you have this like the shortcomings and the family dynamics of Red at the Bone. Now the title of this one comes from we're all red in the bone, like we're all exactly the same, even though we might have diversity changes and social economic changes. This is a really fast read, and it's going to be written in prose, so it's written like we speak. So fast-paced sentences. And in this one, it talks specifically about what it's like to be a young person who's expected to be held accountable for their actions, even though developmentally they are not prepared to meet the expectations of those realities. Did I just talk in a circle?
No.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, you could sign up for the military at XYZ age, but you're not old enough to do other things that seem a little bit more harmful. I don't know. It's a play on words, but it was a really, really good book. Because it's written in verse, you have to kind of go back and forth for who's talking, both because they're both girls. So oftentimes when you can have two different protagonists and you have different settings and things like that, you can keep the words and the worlds different. This one I did get a little bit confused on, so I'd have to go back and forth and figure out who was actually speaking part to part, but that did not pull away from the story at all. We do have Red at the Bone as a book, an ebook, and an e-audio book, and I hope by all means that if you don't read Red at the Bone, you do pick up some type of Jacqueline Woodson story and actually delve into it. She is a fantastic, fantastic storyteller. You want to do another one?
Yeah. So I printed 2 covers for my next one. And Still I Rise by Maya Angelou is one of my all-time favorites. I actually have it tattooed on my back, a piece of one of her poems. But this is just a collection of her poetry, including the poem And Still I Rise, which, I mean, if you haven't heard it, like, maybe you're living under a rock or something. But Maya Angelou she's just a beautiful writer. She is like a beautiful person. Her birthday was like 2 days ago. What would have been her birthday. But she did a lot for like activism things like women's rights, the rights of people of color. So she fought a lot of battles, and she made a big difference in people's lives. And I mean, her writing is just beautiful. So this is a collection of her poems. Which
Is it written kind of like a memoir?
No,
No,
it's just
okay.
poetry. She has a lot of
I think
books.
the Caged Bird one isn't that her memoir?
I think so.
Okay.
But she has just a lot of different books, which
feel
are
like she's
collections
quoted
of poetry.
everywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, she's
like the godmother
posters.
of poetry. She's like the thing that started National Poetry Month. So, highly recommend. We do have this as an ebook think maybe as an e-audiobook, but we don't actually have the book in our collection.
But we could do interlibrary loan.
Yeah, but we could get it through interlibrary loan.
So with
if
your
you wanted
library
to read
card,
it.
if we do not have a book in the format that you're looking for, let us know. We can try to get it from another library. Just this morning, I received a book from California that I wanted to read, but no other local libraries around here had it. So there are options. Please talk to one of us. We'll be happy to try to get our hands on a title, even if that means shipping it across the country. I have a couple more. How are we doing on time? Okay, it'll be a long
I only
episode.
have 2 more. So.
Okay, I'm gonna go quick. So Honey Girl is the story that has nothing to do with honey. This is gonna be an LGBTQ romance. It is way different than I expected to read. So in this story, it's kind of like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas storyline, except for that small snippet is like this much of the story. The rest of the story is her finding her own identity and her family expectations. It was very, very different. It was a book that totally was different than what I was expecting. But this is Morgan Rogers' Honey Girl. We have this one as a book, an ebook, and an e-audio book. And I used it as my Expanded Horizons last year or 2 years ago. I don't remember. But yeah, it's a good book. Here's another Jacqueline Woodson one. This is going to be her young adult novel. This one is actually told from the perspective of a child whose dad is an NFL star and is going through a lot of memory loss, and how to help his family retain the memories that he has of growing up and the things that he wants his family to remember even when his dad's memory is slipping. So this is going to be advocating towards mental health changes and things like that. This one is heavily related to the sports world, but it's a book and an e-audiobook here in our Napanee Public Library collection. Okay, I know why you have her picked out.
So this I'm saving for last.
I know, go for
But
it. Oh, you're gonna do this one
I
first.
have another one by, I'm gonna say this wrong, Rupi Kaur, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Good to be
It's Milk and Honey. So I liked her other books a little bit more than this one. But, so like The Sun and All of Her Flowers is my favorite. But Milk and Honey, it's kind of similar. So something that I noticed with her writing is all of her books kind of have the same feeling, but they're still really good. They're still really impactful. They deal a lot with like feminism. There's trigger warnings for like sexual assault and how she deals with it, how she feels about it. It talks a little bit about like the female body, and just feminine rights and love and relationships and things like that. So that's mostly what Milk and Honey kind of is about. At least that's how I took it. But Rupi Kaur is probably like one of the most prevalent
Yeah, I feel
female poets of like our generation. So it's not surprising that most people have heard of her books, but I feel like not a lot of people read
I've
them
read them, yeah.
or talk about them.
Well,
so
they're often like on display at Barnes and Noble and
Yeah.
other bookstores, and their covers are simplistic and
Yeah.
beautiful. So
and
I could
that's
see
kind
maybe
of
that's
how
why.
her poetry is.
Yeah.
I mean, there is like a little bit of, she does like her own illustrations in some of them, which kind of helps like push it along. And like you might not know that that poem was about the female body, but then she has like a little illustration, and then you're like, oh, that makes sense. So very much feminist, but very much good. And it's one thing to like just know like, yeah, she writes poetry, but like to read these books, it kind of just like opened my mind to like feminine poetry, and just it's just another way to look at things.
Yeah.
So
It's
I really,
almost like the activism and like,
yeah.
do you know this is happening or this is how people feel? Yeah.
So we do have these books in our collection, but most of the time they're always checked out.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising. I've had this one on hold for a few weeks, but I have read it, but it's still checked out. So highly recommend.
I have another National Book Award here. Elizabeth Acevedo has written multiple books. She is a freestyle, how do you say that? A slam poet. She is a slam poet, but she also is an author. And so when she's writing, you feel the pacing. So I Okay, so in this one, it really reminded me, okay, so it's a poetry version of, what's that Anna Kendrick movie?
Pitch Perfect.
Pitch Perfect. Okay, so like that's how I felt when I was reading this one. So it's got kind of like a school setting and like pushing yourself outside of your boundaries and then finding the stage and the platform which you can express yourself. That's what this book did for me. So this one, it's about that school slam poetry, and she's always been writing her words out, but now she's going to take the opportunity. Can she push herself out there to actually read the words that she is writing, and what type of impact is that going to make on the people around her that do not know what her internal thoughts are? This one is a really fast read. Elizabeth Acevedo has written multiple books. I think they're all teen. Does that sound right? Can't remember.
No idea.
Okay, but it's going to give you a really good a story. This is going to be a novel in verse where each poem and each section of the story comes through to tell a complete story. This one we have as a book, an ebook, and an e-audiobook. I would highly recommend this be one that you listen to because Elizabeth Acevedo is the one who narrates it, so you have her angstiness in the reading as she is actually telling this story. Okay, your favorites, go for
I'm
it.
excited. Okay, so a little backstory. I had never read poetry. I didn't really like it. But I did Expand Your Horizons the first year we ever did it, and one of the tasks was to read a book that you share and like the author you share a name with. So I was like, you know, Baumgartner, nobody writes with the name Baumgartner. So I searched Michaela, and Michaela Angamir popped up, and I was like, oh, okay, it's poetry, like, why not? So I requested that this book get added to the library collection. This is When He Leaves You by Michaela Angamir. Then she wrote the second book, You'll Come Back to Yourself. And then just this last month, she came out with this book, Please Love Me at My Worst. And these books are like my whole heart. They're my most favorite books I've ever read. It got me into poetry. I would have never read any of these if it wasn't for these books. So Michaela is like a real person. She told me happy birthday on my Instagram the other day. I literally fangirled. But she's like a real person. She's super relatable. She struggles with the same things that we struggle with, you know, body image, relationships. I think she, with the help of this book, recently just announced that she was part of the LGBTQ community. So there's a little bit of that in Please Love Me at My Worst, but it's not really the focus. But her books, they're inspiring, but they're relatable. They deal with heartache, they deal with growing, they, you know, deal with relationships with your parents, relationships with your significant others, relationships with strangers, you know, it kind of just touches on everything. So these two you can read together. There is a journal that goes with this one, but When He Leaves You, You'll Come Back to Yourself. These two are really quick reads. This one is more of a standalone, and it took me a little bit longer to go through, but it was just like, I have my own copy. I was highlighting it, I was underlining it, I was folding the pages in, which I never do, but I was like, I want to go back and read that. So it's just that good. These are like pure poetry, like collections of poems, but they have an overall theme which goes with, you know, the title. So,
Dude, you're an excellent co-host for this theme.
I
Thank
know.
you so much.
I'm excited.
I mean, like, I hope that you have seen the joy that we have, that poetry, books in verse, novels in verse, and like this prose. This can be such a unique genre, but if we've piqued your interest at all, please let us know. We'd be happy to help you find books in our collection. If you watch this in hindsight, we'll have the list in the comments where you can see what titles we had. And as always, stop by and see us here at the library. We'd be happy to help you find items in our collection. The next episode of Book Bites is going to be next week, the 14th. We are going to be featuring books. Okay, bear with me because we were talking about trigger warnings. Clowns are a trigger warning. We don't do clowns. But we're going to do a circus themed books. because I found that as I was reading, I'm like, oh man, this book and this book remind me of that book. And so we're going to try it. We're going to do a greatest show themed book bites that's going to have all types of books that have to do with the natural wonders of people and the skills that they have under the big top. So join us for Book Bites with Maggie. That's going to be episode 8. This was episode 7, season 3. Michaela, again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you.